What's up, guys? Welcome to a new day. I'm Stephanie Ryder, and this is the 365 Shares podcast. It's January 17th, 2024, and this is the 17th episode of the 365 Shares podcast. Today, I finished watching a mini-series called Daughters of the Cult. I watched it on Hulu. Really fascinating. It's about a group that I had never heard of, but that were prominent in the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s for the goings-on. But it was a Mormon group, a polygamous sect of the Church of Latter-day Saints that split off, went to Mexico. They had a leader or a prophet who was leading this group. I won't go into a lot of it, but the one brother was in charge. The other brother wanted to be in charge, so he killed the brother and took over. And it started just a string of what they called blood atonements, which are murders. And I guess in the old Mormon text, there is a reference to saving someone's soul by spilling their blood on the ground and killing them. But there were all these children. There were like 13 wives and 70 children or something of this guy who killed his brother and then took over, and then he became the prophet. And it's all about how they were constantly running all over the country to avoid law enforcement, how they were all brainwashed and raised in this cult and told that they were God's chosen people and that were being persecuted. And they were trained to use guns and semi-automatic weapons and kill people, and they were ordered to kill people. And obviously the young girls were like married to much older men. There was just so much drama, and it's kind of an ACA type of family situation. And in ACA, they talk about all the different types of families that can lead you to become an adult child. And there's obviously alcoholic or substance abusing families. They also talk about strict religious and or military families as being something that can prevent your true self from developing. And they talk about, families where there's physical abuse, sexual abuse, any kind of dysfunction, and cults. So they really kind of hit like all of the possibilities. And it was really wild to watch it because it really just put in perspective my own life and the things that I went through and the details of my family's dysfunction. But a lot of them didn't survive. There were a lot of people murdered. There were a lot of people who committed suicide, unfortunately. But they did speak to a handful of the adult children who survived. And they did a lot of healing. And at the end of it, one of them talks about learning about trauma and what it does to you and how to heal it and the progress that she's made. And it was really inspiring, like to hear people who have come from much, much worse than what I came from, but who have made lives for themselves, who have good attitudes. One of them was just like, I have a happy life. Like I have kids and grandkids. Like I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on the past. And like just to hear stuff like that is really incredible because I spend a lot of time dwelling on the past, and it was nothing like being raised in a polygamist Mormon cult in Mexico and being a constant refugee and being in poverty and being like married to an old man when I was 15 or 16. I didn't go through anything like that. So I definitely recommend it if you want something to watch. It's a well-done docuseries, and it's also just interesting. And it's something that I guess people that were, paying attention, especially in the Southwest and, like in Mexico, Utah, Texas, where a lot of this stuff was going on, they probably were aware of it. It was like a current event back in the day. So it's always just interesting for me to learn stuff like that. I'm Steph, and this is my share. The topic for today is service, and the affirmation is, on this day, I will trust that a higher power will express itself through our group's conscience, giving us an opportunity for unity and spiritual growth. So I've just been thinking a little bit about service in ACA. And in our meetings, we always say we use service as a way to aid in our recovery, and we give back by doing things like leading meetings, donating our time. And it kind of just reminds me of how a lot of people learn, where you hear it once, do it once, teach it once. And that's the way to really internalize something new. And so if you go to a meeting and maybe you go to 6 meetings before you even share, or maybe you go for 6 months before you decide you want to lead your first meeting. It took me a little while to get comfortable, and the first few times I did it, I was really nervous, even though it's the same format every time for this Monday group that I go to. But I think it does help to go from just being sort of a passive observer or someone who's just absorbing the information from everyone around them, which is very helpful, and everyone should continue to do that regardless of which stage of your recovery you're in. But you go from being a passive observer to being more of an actor in the group, whether you're leading a meeting or just any other. I'm trying to think of like other service examples, but and then the other thing that me and another member did a few months ago was step up for the person who was leaving their post as the group service representative and the treasurer. They'd been just doing both jobs for a few years, didn't really want to do it anymore, didn't know if anyone was going to take it over. So thankfully, me and this other person took over the group service representative, or GSR, and the treasurer position, which is great. So we're carrying the meeting on. And we're, making just a couple of little improvements to like the sign-in sheet and the intro of the meeting, and seeing if we can incorporate anything new and update the format a little bit. And some of the meetings have more formal packets that they made, like permanent folding handouts that people use during the meetings in addition to the books. So I'm going to look into getting something like that made once we take a group conscience and figure out what we want the intro to be, if we want to modify it a little bit. And a group conscience is basically everyone taking a vote, and that's the way that everything should really be decided in ACA, is by group conscience. No one person should be making decisions alone. And even though I'm the group service representative, I can't just unilaterally change the meeting. And even though someone else is the treasurer, they can't decide that they're going to spend all of our money on XYZ, whether it's sending it to the larger state organization of ACA, whether it's buying new materials. That's all stuff that gets discussed. So if you're in ACA or thinking about getting into it, or any other recovery program, or even if you're just in therapy, or if you go to yoga, or if you are into meditating, just try to think of some ways that you can give back, where you can go from being that hear one and do one role to that teach one role. Like, think about something you can teach someone. And we all have things that we can teach. Maybe we're not an expert in any of these recovery tools or programs, but we all have something we can teach. And just sharing your story and listening to someone else's story can be so impactful. And as someone who leads meetings and who is always hoping for more people to step up and lead meetings, if you do go to any type of recovery meeting, definitely take a risk and sign up to lead. And if it's a good program like ACA, even if you completely botch it, which is hard to do because there's a script and you kind of just read from the script, but even if you stumble your way through it, everyone will be very forgiving, and there will be someone in the meeting who can answer any questions or can help you along. So once I got through the first few where I was really nervous leading, it's a very comfortable position for me, and it makes me happy when a meeting goes smoothly and people got something out of it, and I knew that I was part of making that meeting happen for the day.